Welcome back to the SCL. It's Valorant time. Rocket League has reared its ugly head the day prior, but thankfully, all those monsters can go out of the closet and step into a better esport, a better title, and hopefully some darn good teams as we're starting off with our Tier 1 Pool 1, if I recollect, no, Pool 2 matchup to start. It's UGA Black against the Charlotte Esports roster, and this is what we highlighted on Twitter as a fraud check for either of these two teams.
Yeah, I didn't really. We're going to go ahead and kind of highlight the whole fraud check thing, but I mean, obviously, it's going to be somewhat of a highlight today, considering that we are looking at UGA, the reigning champs of the last split, seeing that they're already guaranteed towards land. A possible slight, as you can tell, 8-minute delay in production is not that big of a deal so long as they make the rounds quick enough and prove that they're still in the top dogs.
Yeah, we'll have to see how it pans out. The game has to get underway, so we'll try to quickly get through this pre-show as best as we can. We'll go and throw it over to our map selection because they at least finished that fairly early before regulation time of broadcast starts. It was Pearl and Abyss that were banned off first, and we've seen a lot of changes in map selection as a whole as Valorant and Riot are trying to test the waters on different things. Bye-bye Ascent. We don't have to worry about that this split for the time being. Lotus and Haven step in for our first two maps in the chopping block. Bind and Fracture were banned, and then Split, shockingly, I was anticipated Fracture, seeing Lotus and Haven be the first two played, is banned out, leaving us that third map of being a very taciturn style of play for a lot of collegiate teams. Let's see if it makes it to that point, though, Dallas.
Yeah, it's one of those maps. I mean, obviously, when it comes around to Lotus and Haven, we see it in the collegiate scene all the time. In terms of map picks, they don't like getting too creative. They don't like getting too outer worldly. They like just going in and kind of keeping things kind of relatively compressed. I mean, the Haven pick, not really the biggest deal in the world. Not too much of a shocker, especially considering seeing Charlotte pick that one. I mean, that's been a historic map for them. I mean, what we've seen over the course of what feels like every single split in terms of Valorant here with the SEL. But, I mean, Lotus, that's just a fan favorite, I feel, just across the board. I mean, teams love seeing those paper mache walls. They love the 3 sites. They love the flexibility that's brought inside of that map, and even more so seeing the recent selections of agents, and even then, better yet, the integration of a new agent, and also Vi's kind of being a little bit more viable is obviously showing a lot of potential for what these maps can do. And especially when you're looking at 3-site maps, more narrow entryways, more convoluted hallways that we're looking at, those sentinels, those picks, those stronger agents that start to be released feel a lot more impactful in the big course of things.
Yeah, and we saw a little of those implementations of, new agents and trying to figure out some different styles of play. We saw 4 Sentinels in the Winter Showcase, where we're testing a new broadcast package as well as switching over to a different production software, which we hope you all wonderfully enjoy, and jumping over to having a full-time production staff behind the booth, that being Shaka. So I'll shout out them here and now as they're handling all of the SEL now, so they deserve a big round of applause for that. They've fully stepped into the role, and I believe they're going to play it to a wonderful T, and that will round out the rest of our production staff alongside, Bulby over in the observing booth. But with that being said, the teams have to round out the rest of the SEL. This is a program that cannot succeed without the players, the universities, the organizations bringing that to a boil. And in Pool 1 for Tier 1, James Madison and Texas State University were top of the 2. You had University of Tennessee at Chattanooga was actually tied for first place coming out of our seeding. And then UGA Red, who's facing off against them in today's game. Apparently based off League OS, we already do have a victory for James Madison University. They take a forfeit win over the side of Texas State. I don't know if that's true, if it was a missed thing, but if that is, that's an interesting decision by Texas State. I don't know what happened for them, but a loss in week 1 off of a forfeit win. The pooling stage is fairly important at this really high contested level of play for Tier 1. Kind of stinks to see it go through.
Which even, it kind of sets a tone for everything else going through the course of the season. Going ahead and looking at James Madison coming into this pool, sitting at the number 1 seed. You wanted to go ahead and at least give a litmus check to, if you wanted to make sure they get toppled down, want to see that threat kind of knocked out of the way, you want to set that moment. You want to go ahead and let the rest of the teams know this is what it looks like an actual matchup. This isn't kind of regulation matches. This isn't kind of set up kickoff situations. It is letting you know that now that we are in the seeding, now that all this is put behind us and we're supposed to be in these relatively even groups, how do they measure to the number 2? How do we get to that point where things feel relatively even? Do the point discrepancies really warrant this team being here? Did obviously the first 3 maps to get to this point become a fluke? We're not really quite sure of that, but obviously long-term, we will be able to see a little bit more or so, but that alone could set a huge tempo for James Madison when it comes around to the postseason, those playoff seedings.
Yeah, now, in our, play-in stage, right, you had to play 3 best of 1, so the scores are not super important. It kind of comes down to map selection. Do you get what you want? Did you kind of get away with what you didn't want? Did they kind of beat you out on that? And then I guess, how did you play the opponents? Some teams are stronger against some styles that opponents play, and then they're weak against others, so there's a lot of hoopla because there's a lot of teams, and this is a qualification of being a limitation of only 8 teams in Tier 1, right? There's going to be teams that are in that lower side of Tier 2, or the higher side of Tier 2, I should say, that arguably could have, maybe should have been in Tier 1, and they're licking their chops. They know that they will have the chance to buy into the playoff side against Tier 1 and be able to beat those teams, teams like Converse, teams like Oklahoma, teams like the UCF Knights, who had a little bit of a tough time, it feels like, in the qualifier in the buy-in stage, but still handled themselves just fine. But like these ridiculously solid teams, even UAH, who's coming out of nowhere, it feels like this semester, with a new stat behind Gray, who's trying to really elevate that team as a captain, as a lead. They're licking their chops, hoping for a chance to take these ones down. And I called out Fraud Check. We were worried initially that this UGA team was not going to be the same roster, because initially in League West they didn't have the same list of players that won the previous semester. That was officially confirmed a couple of this part in the buy-in and in the play-in stage, where it was the fact same team. So we had no more questions, no more doubts about them. They proved themselves last split. But the second UGA team, the one that kind of snuck through in the bottom side of that top of Tier 1, I think seed 7 or seed 8 at the point, they're going to have the biggest check against them, because they're facing the number 1 team, tied for number 1 team, I should say, in the opposing pool at the University of Tennessee at Chattanooga.
Yeah, obviously UGA just built a program here. Could build a dynasty to some regard, like what we see in football. But really what it comes down to is showing up to these matches, and better yet, making sure to perform when you are inside the server. That's the biggest thing at the end of the day. And honestly, looking at the rest of these matches, you mentioned already UGA Red being on the opposite side of the end, and I'm able to go ahead and kind of pull through and show that they're here for this matchup. But knowing that still, all over the place, we got so many Tier 1 teams now. We got so many teams just across the board in Tier 2. What we darn near doubled our entire league size over the course of a single Christmas break. It's insane to see, and just go ahead and make a testament to that, of what has accomplished so far. So seeing that there's a lot more teams now, there's a lot more wild cards, there's a lot more possibilities, and obviously with all the changes, there's a lot new Valorant to be watching. So already looking at agent selection, things being locked in. Taeho and Vise, the two that I mentioned, of course, are going to be coming into play here because Valorant power creep does exist, everybody. It exists in every single game you play, because why would you want to play somebody new if they're not going to work?
Now, we saw, I believe it was Georgia Tech employing, no, it was UAH in game 1 in the Winter Showdown. Taeho on map 1 on Haven. We did not see Taeho at all for the second map of Lotus before jumping on over to the third map. We've seen a lot of craziness out of Taeho in pro play. Obviously, VCT Americas was heavily played by Sentinels.
Yes, Americas is where we saw a lot of them.
99% of people here are probably Sentinels fans. It's just the plague of being
right,
an NA fanboy, right? Like, it's just how it fans out. But the amount of oppression you have as a Taeho is just so paramount to an offensive team's attacking prowess, right? And Ruda, who, if I recollect correctly, was a very solid duelist previously for this side, now over on the Taeho role and stepping away, letting step over to the Neon instead, kind of feels like they're trying to play into the strengths of that, still being super dominant as a player, knowing that they're confident. Anyone who's played duelist or plays duelist in their spare time has confidence. It's something in the mental of knowing that you are the person who's supposed to be out front gunning, the person who's supposed to be clearing those angles. It's your responsibility, your role, and you let that weight lay on your shoulders. I think Taeho is the perfect agent to parlay that over to take the mantle, lay in those salvos, get the information on top. It's like having a Sky while also having a breach and having a brim on top, and then you still can go out like a duelist and frag.
No, I mean, Taeho is just outstanding. I mean, I could sing his praises all day. I mean, because he feels like an initiator, at least in my role. I've always loved playing controller, but playing initiator as well, being in that flex slot, that little window of players. I mean, because everybody has to know that window to some regard. Your duelists know how to initiate. Your initiators know how to play duelists. It's a whole entire synergy that's developed when you find these duos, when you find what makes you feel like you fit best into a team role. But, I mean, knowing Taeho, he has that creativity of a controller. He can really just go ahead and lock down areas of the map, go ahead and completely isolate players, and better yet with that ultimate, it's just basically breach but does damage. It's disgusting. But the one thing I have notably seen over the course of this VCT Americas and just in general is the integration of Vise now coming into play. Wasn't touched on nearly at all during release of this first match, but now already going ahead, not finding too much because we were talking about Taeho. Well, who else than Isco to go ahead and open things up with a 2K on that exact agent with nothing but a gun?
Let's see how much value has to be brought as the transition now on the offense for UNCC will try to be a bit closer towards the C site. Working from Waterfall, obviously not a whole lot of value found in B. A big failure on their part, but it is just a pistol round, and they'll have to make up for that with a little bit of extra burst for distance and the ghosts in hand. So he's just going to try to play very close to the player who's just stepped in close to Mound. Zach has a chance to maybe take a swing up if they hear that spike being tapped for nary a moment. They're going to go and try to poke out front of these trap wires. Hop over for Fuzzy. Wants to beat this first. Trying to get an engagement against Zach. And Zach will go ahead and lay down the utility.
One enemy remaining.
Sees tags the teammate in the process, and Tins counters their own back in return, laying up UGA Black for a first round win to start off this series on the right foot.
Yeah, going ahead and get themselves a little bit of ground to work with, and considering that also their selection in general, I'm expecting they're going to want to be taking right on a much more consistent basis, especially knowing that Clove. They're going to be a little bit more aggressive, but even then, the trade-off of that, knowing that they're not on the side of the field where you're going to be seeing that spike coming into play, they're going to be playing a little more passively. They're going to be looking to go ahead and have that Clove die in an area of the map where it actually feels impactful when you know this spike is definitively going to go down. Otherwise, you kind of completely lose that, but then again, you become like every other controller in the game. So that's that power creep that we're talking about once more already coming into play. But speaking of eyes, looking at the plays, looking at these flashes, getting a lot more proactive, seeing these players just want to go ahead and find these early engagements. UNCC is just trying to snuff something out from UGA, but they're going to get them absolutely nothing because they're holding the grounds. We saw the Odin purchases. We're seeing these guys just go ahead and spray through those walls I talked about earlier that are just made out of the paper mache.
One enemy remaining.
Oh my god.
Spike down A.
7-6-2 off in the direction of the side. And Isco will not be kept back from their ace. Pressuring forward into A main, out with the Sheriff. And it is a round 2 ace coming out from your Taeho. We highlighted how dangerous we felt this agent was going to be. Put it in the right player's hands. We were saying it's got to be Ruda. It's looking to Ruda for the UNCC side. No, turn it back. UGA want their time to shine. And Isco is proving in round 2 that they were the returning champs for a reason, and they want to come back for the 2-time.
I mean, that's got absolutely nothing to do with the utility at hand. You put that in any kind of player. I mean, a Cypher could have done that at the end of the day. But what it really comes down to there is obviously being at Tejo, better yet, the ultimate that's available off of it. If there's anybody to go ahead and say, let's just go ahead and feed a guy for a round, get this one out of the way, that may have been your literal worst decision of all of them, considering that this is a 3-site map. I talked about how much more contracted and convoluted they become, and this guy's just going to go ahead and pop it, find here and keep people off the back. And meanwhile, chase everybody else into another avenue of a crossfire to find themselves 6 feet under. But in a 2v3 situation, UNCC is looking to go ahead and kind of pull something out of this thing because it's not looking too hot right now. But in a 2v3 scenario, there's still a lot more players phasing your way. And better yet, a Fuzzy trying to clutch it up.
Talking about how good FaZe was in those finals and trying to prove that once again. Fuzzy, a little bit of util squirming their way. FaZe will not get the better end of that engagement, and so much breach utility just completely snuffs out any chance for Fuzzy to come up. That first bullet would have had to hit head, and with a Phantom, there's no guarantee we'll get that one-shot instant kill. You need that Vandal for that guarantee, and that second shot's going to be slowed and delayed because of the concuss that went your way. UGA will break that standard mold of Valorant. They will start us off on the right foot in a 3-0 fashion, and if you're the side of Charlotte Esports, how do you try to come up with an answer? Obviously, round 4 is going to be a bit more desperate. You know, try to go for maybe region armor, Sheriff's a Stinger out of C's to maybe get the eco a little bit lower, maybe less of a priority player for having a rifle in the next round. But just try to squirm, try to prowl for these frags, because if you can get one, that's a gun that's dropped, and then you can either force UGA to prioritize trying to hold on to that weapon and bringing it back, or stall it and just having to play against it when you can then collect it later. As it looks like the Charlotte side just want to engage into site Dallas. They already have the C site, but UGA didn't lose a single player in the process and almost managed to steal one away as they're now rushing them in with only pistols, and Zach just can't survive the onslaught.
Hey, that's what you need. Just look for something. That's another gun in the hands, and already you see Sap. Don't go ahead and overextend yourself, buddy. You need that gun to pass off to the rest of your team just in case things go wrong. And, well, Isco's showing up. Things are more than likely going to go wrong. Already sitting at 10-1 coming into this round, ending the whole thing of it at 14. I mean, the guy is keeping it rolling, where we're now seeing another ultimate on the board, literally 1 round later. You're just... I was going to just attest to the point to what UNCC had to do to get themselves back into this with such a slow start. I mean, 3-0 is the end of the world by any means, but 4-0 things get a little bit more desperate. Once again, you see a bye round, but you have an ultimate where you literally don't have to engage, and yet you're still doing monumental damage, and better yet, even possibly finding kills off the back of it. And doing this situation over and over again where it's saying, hey, we finally have guns, they don't need to shoot back. They can still find those kills. They can still find those results. And then when you get in a situation where, hey, they have to take the gunfights, they got better guns than you. You have to understand what you're giving UGA on a round-to-round basis. You got to slow that thing down.
Yeah, if you get the Armageddon out once again, there's no fault to say that they can't do more with it. They just go ahead and gat it off instantly in towards A. They send it off towards them paralleling. Nobody there, though, for Charlotte Esports. They've rotated. They've taken C. They like the quick approach. There's not been too much for UGA to keep them back. It's just that the retakes have been a little bit too successful for that defensive side, and Charlotte Esports are very aware of that fact. Ruda in a very tight spot, tucked away in the pivot point, out from defender spawn. Able to sneak away too. Zach and Isco down.
All right.
FaZe hunting for a very possible ace on the horizon, has gotten 4 for themselves and just has to isolate this one remaining player. Soon enough, this smoke will start to dissipate. Clove smokes last a pretty large while, but Sep will eventually fall, and it's stolen by side for UGA as they are proving here consistently through these 5 rounds. They are a team not to be underappreciated, not to be devalued. My goodness, has Georgia blown us away so far.
I mean, they were to go ahead and definitely have the opener that they're looking for, and even then, better yet, now actually having themselves another ultimate on the board. It only took Tejo having 2 annihilations for us to get there. But UNCC better yet have some of their own. But the issue is they don't have the guns to follow up now. I mean, this game has just been in a situation where it is an uphill battle, and it's so much for UNCC to deal with that. I mean, in a round with these Sheriffs, they're finding a little bit of value here and there, but they're finally up to go for the double down, find themselves another round with the weapons in hand, and understandably so, because having that annihilation, almost having Fuzzy's ultimate available as well. I mean, that's going to be detrimental to them to be making sure that UGA can't go for these retakes, because they're very successful in getting these initial plants. It's all about the hold and just ironing out that time to get something on the field.
Salver's used to try to keep the player in waterfall back, but they're still keeping bays at bay. They had the ultimate online. They knew they just needed to extend the space. Either get there in one or just resurrect and come right back into it. They'll swing against Sep. Sep does get the better end of that fight before throwing up the fast lane and just trying to stall out the retake from UGA. It's arguably the best odds for Charlotte to have a successful round in front of them, but it's only going on in an even footing in every one of these fights until Tense, now joined by Isco coming in from Mound, has only one player left to deal with. C's trapped now, short side of ramp, just on site. Salvo to keep them back at bay. And nothing matters at all. It is 6-0 for the UGA side, and the Bulldogs are hounding this UNCC offense. They just don't have any chance to breathe.
Well, congratulations, Georgia. I mean, if you go ahead and close this thing out, we can say that the delay that you have given us, you have compensated for just as greatly. Already going ahead and compensating for everything, getting things rolling here. And I forgot about the new little quips there. I don't even remember what they're called because, you know, they're cosmetics that aren't skins. They're cosmetics that don't shoot. So
they're
who really
stim
cares?
simulators, just so you can.
Yeah, let me get a fidget spinner inside of Valorant. Last thing I need. But considering that UNCC has all 5 ultimates, I think this is a good point for a timeout. I mean, just find yourself in a situation where you slow down, and I even talked about just finding a way to rob resources in UGA. We see it again and again and again, where UNCC, they have themselves a pretty good shot. They find themselves in some equilibrium, but it feels like as soon as they find themselves comfortable, they never get the point to actually be comfortable. They just become complacent because immediately they get 2-3 players just whacked off by whether it be Vase or whether it be Isco, just somebody coming into sight and unexpectedly wiping out a couple. So it needs to be that point where they need to be watching each other more so and looking for these trades to shut down these impact players out of UGA rather than actually just thinking about the objective. Because, I mean, realistically, UGA, you look at their lineup, you look at their kill spread right now, it's not just a full team effort just yet. It's pretty top heavy right now.
Yeah, it's Isco's game to shine right now, and that will obviously change, you'd expect, heading into a second map. This is George's map pick. You can see in our bottom left our new overlay that we've added in this semester, something we were really excited to bring in, and we had a bunch of different variations behind the scenes into it, but we're fairly happy with where you're right now. You can see it's George's map pick, followed up will be Charlotte's over to Haven. So again, another 3 objective map, which Tejo's viability for longer rounds where you can recharge that salvo over time, over 40 seconds to come back and get another 2 to lay in as it sends out both in the same exact usage. It just means that arguably Isco is going to have another map where they can stall out and play for time, and whether they start on defense or not, which we know in fact they are, it's going to be a problem that Charlotte Esports will have to start to capitulate to more success. Side gets that first frag. Ruda just outstayed their welcome inside of A main. Not sure why they were hesitating too long. Trying to stall. It's your Teo that's your initiator that's lagging behind. You'd expect maybe a Sentinel laying utility down, but that's not the case, which now forces Charlotte over to the C side, something they've been fairly good about, but they've left 2 now here towards bottom mid. Close to B. That's Fuzzy.
Ooh,
Trying to get
Fuzzy.
these spikes with C's assistance. You've now gotten 3 kills in that space, but you have no one on site. Pichu can just try to play against the space, but this is why you brought the Omen. They can just rotate on over to the A site, get a free spike down. Now Pichu's nowhere near any controllable zoning and distancing for a defender, and you've now got 3 because Fuzzy has just devastated the Georgia roster, but Zach just comes out on top, and he's feeling confident, Dallas. They even popped the neural theft.
I mean, I like it. I mean, there's no better time than right now to go ahead and get all that information to work with, because more times than not, your teammates are just running through everyone. But not having that gun out and even then go for the swing and finding at least one is good in its own right. What's even better is here UNCC finally getting themselves on the board. I mean, it took obviously Fuzzy to take out the majority of the team, if not more than that. But I mean, considering what we're seeing so far, only utilizing one of the ultimates, going ahead, popping that from the shadows, finding a window to even utilize that, because it feels like Omens never really find all the value out of the ultimate more times than not. So when you get one of those circumstances where you say, I can confidently say that worked, that helped, and even then, it's just worried about the rest of my utility. It's not another factor in the back burner. It's not another kind of wrench inside the gears. It is something that is here, has been played, and has gotten us something to work with. The UNCC hopefully can take a little bit of a light at the end of the tunnel, kind of see something further down now with these 4 other ultimates to work with, a round win under their belt, and maybe some guns to play with, and see whether or not they can get another.
Oh, the paper mache that is this map, that is the approach into A, is still coming out to rear a dangerous parlay for this Charlotte side of offense. They use their salvos to try to clear out once again either side of opposing pillar, knowing that a smoke was placed there. You'd assume that Georgia are placing it to try to stall you out, get a player into space or maybe out of space. That's not the case whatsoever. Georgia instead have a majority of their players closer to B. One now taking the waterfall retreat into the B site and just kind of waiting for any sort of information. Vise maybe for UNCC, who just saved the day last round for Fuzzy. That is Fuzzy for the Charlotte side, just saved last round, trying to maybe squeak away a kill, get into space, get an ult orb out of it in the process, try to climb in, steal it away from UGA, because the moment they do know they're pushing to the site, which we see here, they're likely going to try to get to mount and get that ult orb replay afterwards. A Sep was a bit dicey there, 4 HP remaining, but Isco does not get as lucky as they thought they would despite being stunned. They'll give up that first blood, and Georgia now have a chance to not really stall out the spike, because this is in fact going down, but have a retake still with 4 players left.
Yeah, I mean, just seeing really what we're working with so far. I mean, it's going to be, once again, another Fuzzy show for the looks of it. Able to go ahead and start things off. You're now in that defensive stance where the Vise is supposed to be going off. Going to have all the utility placed to go ahead and set their own little arena. But UJ on the retake, I mean, it comes down to Tense and Zach. And Zach, we've seen already go ahead and find a nice little, attempt during that last round, but having now an actual secondary, having a player to follow up, and even then maybe having an ultimate, because Tense has been holding on to this for a while. And finally, as you get the Rolling Thunder to roll out, it's just not going to do enough. It's not going to find almost of anything, because you didn't get a kill off the back of it, and the stun didn't even matter.
Yeah, with all of that just kind of falling apart for UGA, they can still look at the success they've had up to this point and be like, we've done enough. We just need to close out this half. Ultimates are channeling up for the Charlotte side. I was concerned that them having 5 ultimates 2 rounds prior when they called that timeout was going to be, we'll burn too many of them to get victories, and then the only victories we'll have in that first half, Dallas, will end up being off the back of those ults. That's not been the case. They've actually done very wonderfully for themselves, knowing that they have these in the back pocket and still not feeling they're pressed to use them. Yeah, you're maybe wasting the potential for them, but if you're coming with round wins, there's not much more. You can't have a better win at the end of the day. A win is a win, and with UNCC, who are already down 6 rounds, they'll take any scraps they can get up to this point, as UJ will have to reevaluate how they want to play defensively, whether that be hyper aggressive or a little bit more stalwart towards side. Isco can't hold that A side alone off towards Garden, so now they've got a whole lot more help. 3 players closer to A, 2 sitting closer to door, who now are direct into sight with B, hoping to assist Bays for the Georgia side, as it looks like the Charlotte offense will prowl directly into the loving arms, where the majority of Georgia's defense are stacked up, and the utility just assaults Sep's approach and stuns the Charlotte roster's entry.
And the preparation there at the Clove, understanding, I mean, there is something coming in that direction. Sitting back, not playing off the trade just yet, understanding that there's enough utility there to give that assistance. I just can go ahead, play the smoke, hope the rest of my team finds those kills, and looking at the rest of UGA and the rest of this round and what unfolded, that's exactly what they've done. Keeping 4 players alive, carrying things over. Only player you lost is Isco, and it's at that point of the game where he has done his job. You have guaranteed yourself an advantage by the end of this half. You're just looking to go ahead and lock UNCC out for as much as you can.
Yeah, the Charlotte Esports offense, you did well for 2 rounds, but a third will elude you in return. Georgia hold off on a big gamble, stacking so many players majority-wise towards B, but with 0 pressure coming through A main, which is something that even when they taken that full sprint, it feels like Dallas towards C, into mound and into sight, they at least had somebody making noise in A main, somebody with utility that direction. That was entirely absent, and I feel like with that lack of intel, with that lack of cues, Georgia could just take that game and B side hold strong as Bays. Once more, gets 3, hunting for a possible 4th, but just can't get it enough on the overheal. Couldn't assist them for the final. Seas has to go for a spray. Wants to check no one's behind box or off towards waterfall, but you've lost your entire roster bar 1, and Seas and Fuzzy just have no clue where they need to head to right now.
Yeah, just trying to figure literally anything out. I mean, they're going to run to players no matter where they go. So, I mean, already there, a great execution from Isco. Finding the trade-off of Tense there. I mean, just looking to find something here to play with. But Tense knowing that there's somebody towards mid, getting some good damage off towards C's. You're looking for this follow-up. You're looking to just find some kind of connection here. And waiting for the spike to go down isn't a bad call, considering that you can go ahead, get back with your teammate, and play for that trade for one last time to get yourself in.
Planted.
Now, where will you head to, C's? Makes the gamble, placing this in a non-default scenario inside of Garden. And because of that, you anticipated you could kind of go towards door, maybe even staircase. You fall directly into the line of sight for the Georgia players, lapping in through your own offensive side, in through the pillar and trunk side, and essentially fall into a blunder of I'm stuck in open space, and there's two very quickly swinging me, and the shots just didn't connect where I anticipated. 8-2, our current score, as Georgia continue the dominance in this first half. 2 rounds remaining, and the Bulldogs, well, they can still reach double digits within the first half, as egregious as that sounds, but there are still 3 ultimates on board for the Charlotte offense. I'd be fairly hard-pressed to imagine they don't start to use those here, because you use them or you lose them. You cannot bring them to that second half, folks.
Yeah, I mean, just seeing really how the things are going so far. I mean, the annihilations have always come out on the rounds when they're required. So, I mean, that's good ideas for Isco. They are already gotten more than enough effort out of that. And considering Baze and being inside these fights so often, I wouldn't blame UGA to go ahead and get these out as quickly as possible. UNCC, they're the ones that have felt relatively reserved in there. They haven't popped in very often. Even then, immediately, as you see, Sty getting that showstopper, immediately popping it. Like, we're seeing UGA understanding that we got plenty of utility. There's a couple rounds of game left. Just go ahead and throw the thing out there, because looking at this kill disparity, the guys that are top heavy, you're going to get it back anyways, more than likely. So, I mean, go ahead. Put the pressure on them. Make their lives miserable and bring them problems to their spawn.
Knowing just how tight of a space A main is and the counterance that you have in utility for Georgia, it's 4 in that round coming out from it. And look, Ultimate's already about to be charged back up for 10 on top. Like,
just over and over.
It's so rough to watch for the Charlotte Esports side. I'm sure it's rough for them to play. You put so many eggs in the basket to try to use your utility, your ult there, your thunder, your rolling thunder out through A main, but you still have to get around multiple doorways and wrappings, which means Armageddon can come back your way and completely cut you off from the flank. You've seen that now be used multiple times on a south to north rotation. Then you have a breach utility for tens that's there. You're stuck behind 2 walls, which means you have so many walls that all of that utility can be funneled in through, and that's destructive ordnance. And then you hear a showstopper. At some point, Dallas, you have to hear that showstopper come out and make that call instantly, that even though we've engaged the rolling thunder here, it's no longer a viable route. We need to go ahead and rotate fast.
Yeah, and it's a beautiful game of stamina here that UGA is also playing as well. I mean, speaking of these ultimates, speaking of this utility, I mean, everybody's taking their turn, stepping up and doing what they need to do. Bates, for example, I mean, obviously going ahead and putting a testament, putting a nail in the coffin right there, but over and over and over again, here we are. Just finding results. And I mean, even then, when we saw Isco and Baze be silent for a little bit, that's when 10 stepped up and said, look, I'm going to pass you, Baze, on the scoreboard for a second, but that's totally fine. You're going to come back in eventually. Everybody has their chance. Everybody gets a breather. It's like basketball. Some players are sitting on the bench and they're saying, I'm going to hit my shots when I go back in. I just need a second coach. And every single one of these players are showing what they're capable of in that.
One enemy remaining.
Use the ult just moments prior. Now you'll have another one sent. This is Vice just trying to rip the weapons out from their hands, but with the sight flipped on its head and a flash sent perfectly out from Tens, who's been one of the best players we've seen in the league as a whole. I think we could say that for a lot of the Georgia roster after their performance last semester, but there has been no halting. It honestly feels like they're looking even better than they did prior. This is Georgia at its finest. And we said fraud check was last season a fluke. They're proving that it very much so was not, because this Charlotte team is one that you cannot trifle with in the score line. Shows that Georgia are having no problem through that first half on defense.
And this is typically a team out of UNCC that we see, I mean, obviously they've had different iterations over the splits, but I mean, it always feels like this squad has able to kind of step things up and really, which I will say, early on in the season, UNCC's never a top contender. They're never looking like an indomitable force, but I mean, looking at how it is right now, I mean, it comes down to late season. That's when they say they understand when they need to lock in. They know when to turn on that switch. They know when to be like, all right, we've obviously been sitting idle for a little bit too long. We found a couple games that have passed by us. But right now in playoffs, that's when they always go insane. But, I mean, if you want a better shot in playoffs, if you want to guarantee yourself that grand finals, you got to make sure to make your life easier right here, right now.
Did feel like a little bit we saw Charlotte underutilizing the stealth drone from Yotejo, and UGA already in round 1 using it to good success, forcing players away from Mount and trying to take engagements a little bit more fruitful for them. Obviously a fight in through A main where you're just not really checking that close left corner. That's a bit of a problem child right now for the Charlotte side, not checking every corner in front of them. But when you are in a pistol round already so far down, he just cannot continue like that. Ruda cannot connect the shots towards Zach Souse. Now on a tear in round 1 of the second half. But Fuzzy, who was the main proprietor of the successes we saw from Charlotte, comes through to tie things back into a 3-on-3 fashion is, well, you can't really worry about the weapons that were dropped. They were likely just ghosts, and people weren't bringing that anyways. They can maybe grab them, but you'll assume that a rotate will be made as Charlotte will try to wrap those players through defender spawn, and that should free up the C side, especially when you send out the salvo, which will stall out anyone through waterfall, and you'll layer a clove smoke to make matters worse for you.
Yeah, I mean, UNCC already knows that they got some extra damage down. In terms of actual health available, that they are going to be leading things out. And Fuzzy still being alive, already going ahead and knocking down every single player UGA thus far. You know this player's healthy. You know this player's probably going to go ahead and close things out. I mean, we've seen Fuzzy be the main proprietor of UGA's downfall when it came into that first half. But the problem is it can't be a one-man army. ISCO can do it, sure, when you're already in the lead. But when you're behind 8 rounds, everybody else has to start pitching in. So speaking of, there's Pichu able to go ahead and get 1 and C's to do it for the other, to go ahead and find themselves a third in the first round of the second half, showing that let's see what we can do when we have a lead and a half. Maybe buy things up, maybe have the same little string of kills, maybe a little more equal compared to just, you know, all loading in on a singular individual. But I mean, look at that, man. I mean, Fuzzy, over the course of that entire half, still in that last round, equates to Baze and Isco, but it's the rest of the team that has to catch up. I mean, we don't have the Baze, we don't have the tents inside of this UNCC squad just yet to really show that, okay, this skill disparity doesn't exist. They have to show us that, and we're just not seeing it yet.
I mean, talk about how weak the threats looked in the original Avengers. Then was like, well, we have a Hulk, right? So like, who cares about the threat? The threat gets harder. A Hulk's not going to do anything, right? Like, this is what you're looking at right now, Charlotte. You're looking at a threat that's much more than a single enemy. It's 5 full players for Georgia. We have a Fuzzy. Well, they've got 5 Fuzzies on their team. That has to change. As the Martial Shots do have 0 connection whatsoever. All of them in between the row of 3. As the Georgia Bulldogs swing through with fervor, catching not just the first player of the Marshall off guard, but 2 more afterwards, and almost took C's to the afterlife with them. But it's still a player disadvantage for the Charlotte retake. As C's has a Bulldog, wants to work alongside Fuzzy with the Phantom, gets there 1. 2 players back aside. Isco needs to change the weapon, but can't cover it in time. No Odin, no problem, it seems like, for Charlotte's recovery, and Fuzzy continues to prove that they are conceivably the best player in this lobby, now tying the kill tally for the Isco on the opposing side.
So long as you can put Fuzzy in a situation of 1v2, 1v3 when it comes around to all the dust settling, that's totally fine. But you just can't put this guy in a 1v5, especially when you see the top fraggers on the side of UGA and see that those are the barrels that he's looking down at the moment. You have to give him some breathing room. You have to say, look, we understand what you're capable of. We know what you can do, but at least give the guy some help. And we see it actually coming to life here. Now having an ultimate in round number 3, exactly what we saw during that first half from Isco. If you can lock these players out from UGA where they only had those pistols once again, it feels almost like a repeat of round number 2, and we saw how that went. But it could be a little bit better because guess what? They're relying on those rifles rather than having that expectation of those budget weapons.
Charlotte want to really claim space towards A main. They want to win the macro battle that is the Ult Orb economy, and they do so get it. But in the process, burning a whole lot of utility for that space, and AOs will come back in 40 seconds. What can you say about the rest of the team? Baze fighting for maybe a free engagement, does get it off to Ruda, but it's stunned in the process by the specials delivery. Because of that, it's an even trade in return, losing out, and both teams having a controller now for UGA gone, and you're having your Teo gone for Charlotte, which is a very valid retake agent. The Fuzzy's made up for a little bit of those losses. 2 kills in quick succession, felled back by Tins. Zach knows that they're so close, can assume that maybe at a player disadvantage, but they're going to have to make that rotate away from A. We knew Breach was there. The question of, was there a third in that process? And that Neon is pretty darn close sitting inside that cubby. And you just have to wait for your team to take that spike and you to find the perfect space to get this plant down. And no matter what, this cutoff, this rotate into sight has been essentially split within 2. C's can maybe catch off Zach, but Zach we know has been a dominant gunner. The stun from out the spawn, but Sep's there for their 1, and Sep will just take the fallback. You're wary now, Tins. You don't know where the safest spot to plant is. And in the process of your transition to the back of sight to find the perfect position, you may just give up an angle that allows that secondary player for UNCC to swing forward into sight. There goes the paranoia. Tins started to put the plant, forced to fall off of it, and Pichu takes the right swing. 5 rounds now for Charlotte Esports, and UGA have not found the perfect footing just yet in the second half.
I mean, it was a perfect pinch, too, coming there from UGA to go ahead and find themselves that plan. I mean, so long as they just kind of delayed things out, take that fight, wait a second, wait for the re-swing on somebody else coming from the other angle, because at that point, you've cleared everything. You found the kills, and if a trade tries to come in, well, guess what? You got 2 players there to just go ahead and find the end result and find yourself that win. But they just didn't go for that route. And even more so, you're trying to play around the A side because your Clove is dead on site and can go ahead and still pitch in those fights in some regards, being dead. So it's just understanding what resources you still have, because you look at everybody else that was alive, didn't have much utility to play with. But if you understand that we're near a Clove, we still got a little bit more than they do.
We'll send out a relay bolt and using the barrage of utility from the Charlotte Esports defense. They're able to cap off too, but Isco's got an Odin back in hand and it deals the barrage right back. This will know with 7-6-2. Armageddon sent in. And this is where you try to see Georgia just try to make sure no one can sit on side. Rifles don't matter. Sheriffs can do a whole lot of damage still, and Side proves that point with 2 nearly instantaneously afterwards. And everyone's low on Georgia's side, but Isco make sure that the Odin will not miss, and Fuzzy will not be allowed to be the clutch king once again for Charlotte.
Yeah, big sense here, already going ahead and getting things rolling once more. I mean, getting themselves just one round. Keep in mind, for this half, they only need 3 to close it out. So not that big of a deal. Able to go ahead and do a third of the job right there. And so long as they just go ahead and start accumulating the ultimates, I mean, knowing that UGA isn't afraid to pop these things, they could find themselves in a lead much sooner. Consider that UNCC, regardless of them finding round wins during this half consistently, they've also been consistently dying, losing a lot of that money while they're finding themselves somewhat of a win spree. You can tell it doesn't matter, one round loss, and losing that streak is going to completely set them behind. So, I mean, this alone could go ahead and just be the nail in the coffin that needs to just close out this map.
Trying to use the stealth drone, nothing being spotted off the back of it. I was going to say that Charlotte didn't use it very well, and I mentioned a little earlier, not using it very well on the offense, but on defense, where your Teo can have a little bit more safety, you could argue that they'll have a little bit more success off the back of that. But Georgia losing the first blood department. Marshall shot connects, and Side will go ahead and collect that weapon that was dropped and kind of move the team off in a different direction. The communication here for Georgia was nearly perfect on their defense, but offensively, we've seen a couple gaps, and Charlotte have not been keen to miss those chances either. That's the reason why we're seeing this score be even close in the first place. Georgia have the control of Trunk. We're on their side. Nobody close to door. Nobody trying to swing from that direction. And the showstopper's out, but they didn't get the perfect boost pack they wanted. Side, back of sight, close here. One more around the corner. They look at the wrong time, and they don't sit it where they should have. Just had no clue. And Sep takes the chances to find You're feeling punished now, aren't you, Charlotte? But
oh my God, Zach! Base!
But just can't hit their shots! Sep almost saved them, but still it doesn't matter. No chance for Zach to go more than 3. Bays round the corner, and my goodness, what a devolution from both sides. What a hectic round. Side not knowing Sep was there. Sep instantly punishing them, finding a second while they're walking in space. That's Bays, and then Zach lining up 3 in a row. This was just an execution and failure for either side, but the individuals saved the day.
I mean, that's what it came down to. I mean, obviously, both teams having a singular individual on a 3K, but I mean, one has to finish the job and one has to do a little bit more. So knowing that UNCC just a little bit more leading into that, I mean, it puts you in a scenario where things feel much better. I mean, even if Base didn't die a little bit earlier, can use that resurrection and for that exact trade, knowing where the player is and just delaying out that time, but that's just not a luxury they can afford as it stands. So speaking of luxuries, well, you don't have the luxury of going and touching that. I mean, looking at this line, this precision is drawn there. Every single player was lined up, with the exception of a singular Vise and a Fuzzy across the map. But, I mean, that's the one player you can rely on to just go ahead and hold an entire third of the map by themselves. So, going ahead, popping this, going ahead, tangling up that gun and showing that it is now just pistols versus rifles. It may not matter as much considering that last round, because Isco finds one. The Phantom's back in play. Zach's trying to understand where Fuzzy is, and with too late of a swing, it's not going to matter as UJ found themselves a match point.
I just feel like the timing there wasn't perfect for Charlotte in that retake. I mean, love seeing the vines go out, the thorns come in and lock these rifles away, but Sep didn't clear their corner that they should have. That was an easy swing. You had the advantage in that direction without being directly spottable from sight, especially if you play the fast lane down first. Wonderful timing by Georgia, by Isco to claim into that space. We've seen just how strong, how static they've been all day. But on top of that, the Odin on Odin battle that we've been seeing the last 2 or 3 rounds is still coming out on top for Georgia. And Isco's arguably in a weaker position to play in for that LMG. Defensively, they should have the better angles. They should be able to just sit static, lay down that fire, lay down the barrage, and keep teams back. But it's just not been the case because Georgia are so quick. The moment a gap is spotted, the moment there's a slight weakness in the defense for the side of Charlotte, Georgia are very quick to claim into the control. Armageddon goes out. Side wants to try to keep Baze safe, but now having a little bit of assistance from the Sentry drone means that they'll have to sit a little bit further back. That suppresses you, spots you away. Now, for Charlotte, you know there's a lot of players in this direction. The question is going to be, do they make a lot of noise on the ramp, or do you send a player like Fuzzy, who's been so darn exceptional in the frag department, to wrap through their spawn? And they wisely will leave that Sentinel closer to C in hopes that the rotate will come through, but the hopes may just be shattered because you've just lost your Teo, and the retake potential, I mean, it almost feels like it's got cut in half with the lack of that utility.
Right. I mean, but still, for UNCZ, Fuzzy's alive, 3 ultimates on the board. I mean, you got more than enough assistance here to get things rolling, but it more so comes into the question of whether or not are you going to find the opportunity to actually pop that? Because, I mean, UGA has found themselves picking off players left and right just for essentially free, and knowing that your Teo is now dead, you don't have any information to go off of. You don't have any denial. You don't have any delays. You have no way to kind of really control UGA's pace here besides a couple smokes and maybe by some Vice flashes. But, I mean, everything else can be more so just coming down to a retake, waiting for that spike to go down, understanding that. But you're going to take possibly another life in the process by trying to find out this information, because there it is. Who's pushing up? Baze, the controller. It doesn't matter if Baze dies, because guess what? Those smokes can still be placed right on site where your team has already gone ahead and reconvened.
Fuzzy's able to strip Isco's HP pool down to 0. Side's been completely stunned by that rolling thunder, and it's an execution force for the Charlotte offense, retaking their own site. The defense has to prowl through plane control for where Georgia have, and it's just Tense now remaining. Tapped is the spike by Peachy, but doesn't want to commit to anything because C's did not have the intel they wanted. And when the Stinger spots the opponent's head, that barrel will not stray from their noggin. It is a 7th round now for Charlotte defense, and UGA will be kept away from the coveted 13 points needed to close out map 1 to send us over to another triple objective map of Haven, where you also don't see that B site hit very consistently, a lot like we've seen in this one, where B has been, what, 3 times in total, and 2 of the times that it was attempted for completely failed or forced them to rotate to C.
That's still more than Haven, considering that you do have that secret cubby, you have that rotation from A. B is there as more so as a secondary plan of, you know, things have hit the fan and now we got to go somewhere else, because this just doesn't seem like it works. Haven, you don't have that leniency. You don't have that option. There's no door, which, I mean, who knows with the revamps of the maps. I mean, we could probably see it eventually where, you know, inside A sewers, there's a big hallway that laps around to it, or another door that comes out of garage. But as the moment stands, it's a bit more of a journey to find yourself on the B side. It has to be committed to. But speaking of commit, here it is. Ari stepping up, finding themselves to a big start here for UNCC to find themselves a possible A, and knowing that this will not only set UGA back in terms of the rounds and their momentum, but even then more so, knowing they don't have to invest many ultimates for this, and better yet, you're accumulating more on top of the fact that UG doesn't have much of an economy to play with. This could be some good looks for them.
Yeah, just keep Isco trapped here towards spawn. Don't give up another frag. Keep Yuriko on top, and that is about as perfect of a round you can ask for. Obviously, flawless is all in its own part a good thing, but feeding the right players the right kills at the right time, which can give their ultimates a charge, can let them swing in afterwards, build up some confidence, because we said it felt like Georgia had 5 consistent players, and Charlotte's offense in that first half only had Fuzzy, and obviously wasn't enough to give them more than 2-round wins. It's completely changed in the second half. Fuzzy's still been doing Fuzzy things. 23 and 16 is absolutely nothing to scoff at, but Season Peach have stepped into the limelight. Sep has been a much more pivotal figure, a couple mistakes here and there, but has been very solid. Ruda has done a whole lot more in terms of utility, while the frags aren't always there for them. You know that they're at least able to close out the occasional 1-for-1 or the occasional flank watch for their team. These are the priority focuses right now for defense, especially when it comes to these retakes. If you lose your Tejo, you got the Vice. I feel like that's the thing that UJ didn't have in the defense, and yet still weren't punished for it, as Charlotte swing a very dangerous angle against Zach down through B main and managed to get the frag.
Yeah, just seeing how this thing is rolling so far. I mean, just good looks here from UNCC, really staying on top of this. But the issue is you got to look at the players that are usually alive. And already right now, considering that Baze just now got shut down, the other 2 players are the ones that had the ultimates, and they're the 2 top frags in that first half. So this has to be somewhat of a synergy. I mean, you would expect, not having the white weaponry is also a very, very big hit to him. Considering that we're both working with stingers, you're not going to be able to find those lineups. You're not going to be able to spray walls while we see kind of, Isco just doing things up while Tense is able to actually get on those closes, find those angles, clear those sights. So here we go. Swinging for one more. Understandably sees one of the players, and still somehow Ruda is able to close out those last two and stay alive with the grit of their teeth.
Mentioned Ruda is really good at watching these flank watches, having control over his zone and playing into their ordinance. And we see it pack up to a T for the final 2 frags in that round and puts them up to the double-digit stat line to maybe get closer to where the rest of the rosters for both sides are lying at the current position. 9 and 12. We were sitting at a 10-2 half, and it very quickly looked like Georgia were going to close out the remainder of that half. But the Charlotte offense, it cannot be compared to their Charlotte defense. This is a much different foray. It's a much different team, it feels like. And you have to assume a lot of the confidence comes from having that vice and the much more success stories they've had off of the breach on this defensive side in comparison to the struggles they were having against the Tejo and Clove combo when UGA were on the defense. Side goes for a quick use here of the showstoppers, being very quickly held back though. Special delivery to Stalin closer towards back to side, opposing into pillar, and obviously laying in some smokes on the back of side to keep away defenders spawn. Once that dissipates though, Fuzzy should have a free line of sight to close out one, but Bates spawn giving up their life. They got a kill in the process, and we just resurrect right afterwards. But Ruda strips away Zach as Sai strips away Fuzzy. Best player for Charlotte down. What is left for UGA? Well, not Bates, because a wizened defense for the Charlotte Esports side falls away from the ultimate. Plays, yes, a lack of time, but they have to get into sight, and they could do so dangerously. Overdrive up for Sep. It's been nerfed, but it won't matter if you hit your shots. Tagging away from one. Side's got 3, but Ruda may just fall away from that nade, but gets away in time. Forced to reload. Isco from up above. You just can't see their head, and Ruda's running out of time. It's a doppelganger on doppelganger. Time probably won't even matter to this point. You'll have to stick to half here very soon, but it won't matter at all. The Odin for Isco, their number 1 weapon for their team in the entirety of this game, and who else to wield it but the 14-2 user at the start of this series to close out home. This map, not a chance, but a third objective map next. That's Haven, maybe, for Charlotte Esports.
Yeah, poetic for the player to go ahead and just kind of start this entire derailing of UNCC for the start of their season is also one to end that first map as well. But keep in mind, there's still more or less in the series. There's another map coming underway. And I mean, honestly, Haven, I don't know if we're going to see too much of a difference considering that, that flexibility of sites. We saw both teams exercise it to some degree, but more so we saw the patience out of them. We saw the active rotations. We saw that it was never just a single committal towards one area of the map. They liked finding these ways, these nooks and crannies to get back towards spawn, find some lap arounds. But the issue with Haven is it's also kind of like Lotus in that same regard, where there's not a rotation to the middle of the map from both areas like there is on Lotus and compared to the Haven, but even then more so, their spawn isn't nearly as open. Lotus, you basically have 3 halls shooting towards every single site, so anytime a rotation comes through, you know it's going to happen. You only have 2 of those avenues on Haven. You don't find nearly as much impact sitting towards the back and finding yourselves with a player planted in that opposing side spawn. So there's a lot of twist ups that, UGA still, I think, have to work with, knowing that, if it gets around to that point where you're forced into more conflict, where you're forced to choose an avenue here or the other, they're probably going to be able to gun those down more times than not, which, if anything, kind of plays in their favor, but we still got to see.
Now, Haven, we've said, is a different beast, but one thing that's very different that you mentioned was fighting for map control on the defense, something that we didn't see a whole lot of here on our prior map, and it is somewhat viable. I mentioned you could have Vice wrap through, try to retake the back of A main. We saw one time in the first half it panned out in a 2v1, but it was a 2v1. You could have come from any direction. They were 6 HP at the time, right? But Haven is a map where if you don't play for map control, if you don't start wrapping that offense and forcing him to stay in a cubby and try to take those fights, you're going to get cut off instead. And we see that a whole lot. While B is not your site to plant, Dallas, it is the site where your sentinels, your ciphers like to wrap back around through to the A site. They like to wrap through to the C side. They like to take that mid window. They like to play into these spaces. You cannot let that go through because Georgia's offense is already too darn effective. You don't want to give them any more freedom. And your defense, you know that Georgia's defense is good. You couldn't survive the first half against that. They're going to take as much map control as possible, knowing how confident they are. But this is all just us taking guesses. We shall see how it pans out after a quick break. Do not go anywhere. We'll be back real soon. No matter how I'm sure it's probably a blessing not to see us on your screens during that short 5-minute break, we're still gladly happy to have you back in to get this game underway. Once again, this is the SCL. This is our first game of the season. We call it the fraud check for UGA, but it was more so the second roster for UGA we were concerned with. This roster, previous champs, Dallas, in the previous split for fall, and they are proving that not much has changed. If anything, they're looking better in some capacities, as they had a damn good game against Charlotte Esports on our first map.
Yeah, they most definitely did. I mean, going ahead and opening up with a bang. But, I mean, keep in mind they have to close in that same regard as well. I mean, keep in mind it is a series. It is not a map. And while they did get their selection and they did win it out, and good for them. That's great. Awesome. It's expected. That's a standard. Good job. You've met the bar minimum of what a team should do, especially as reigning champs of the last split. So, what else is left, UGA? Let's see it, because you got another 3-site map. So, if that's your strength, that's your strong suit, good for you. UNCC handed it to you on a silver platter. But you still got to gun out. You still got to have the compositions. You still got to have that synergy. You still got to make sure that, well, that confidence wells up and actually carries over rather than just going ahead and bolstering that ego.
Now, can we talk for just a moment? We'll highlight back to the end of map 1 as well as the start of map 1. That map ended. The sun rose and the sun set with Isco being the person. Sorry, I punched my mic there for a second. Isco being the person to highlight for them. Obviously, the 1v1 at the end against their doppelganger, Vruda, clutching it up, making sure there was no chance for the defuse. Time was already nearly an impossibility anyways for Vruda, but they held strong. They held their own and played it well. But then the first 9-10 rounds, it felt like, for Georgia in the first half, where Vruda at the start went, 14-2? In 3 rounds, they had the ult twice. Was it around 4 rounds? They had the ult twice. In back-to-back rounds, they literally used the ult in 1 round, and then the next round they used it again. That is unreal from Isco. And while Isco fell off throughout the remainder of it, as their role was getting picked up by everybody else performing as they should, it's no fault to him whatsoever. Isco was still a solid force with the agent that they were playing in hand. You don't see Tejos as often for Haven, it feels like, in high-level play and where it's kind of still being tested by a lot of teams and a lot of upper echelon programs, but you do still see kind of that defaulting status quo. Neon fell back with the nerfs, but some teams may want to go for that. Maybe steps up to it once again to do so. You see Sovas, you see Jets, you see Breaches still in heavy fire. You see the Cyphers, that's your player that's wrapping it for map control. And then last time you see Omens, though Clove is exceptionally powerful, and Baze almost feels like a Clove one-trick with just how darn good they are at that agent.
I mean, I don't mind it, honestly. I mean, Clove is very capable of almost anything. I mean, sure, you're not having that Omen that goes ahead and bypasses a lot of the kind of cipher trick things that are placed out. But when you look at the compositions, I mean, so long as you're just hearing those things and clearing them, you're not concerned about that. Once you actually get into the gunfights, when you get into the nitty gritty, the entire just conflict that arises, Clove is a much better option than than Omen in those scenarios. And UGA puts enough pressure, they put enough of just weight on the gas pedal to be in those scenarios enough to warrant that selection. Because, I mean, keep in mind what we saw in the VCT or in every single league as a whole. We saw these duelists kind of shifting in these controller, slots. It's, as awkward as it was fun to watch there for a little bit. But when I realized that half the guys are playing Omen and they're not playing Harbor, I'm like, this isn't as fun to watch. See how it goes. Clove makes a lot more sense. You're actually playing a duelist. You're actually getting utility that amounts to refilling your health like a Reyna, coming back from the dead to once again say, I'm not done yet. It's this entire surmounted action that UGA Black is wanting to force on UNCC over and over and over again. And as I mentioned earlier, so long as you have at least some player there, somebody alive, or whether you're giving them an assist or whether you're actually putting the bullets down yourself, that's all you need. And they were able to do that sufficiently. Taking turns, somebody going ahead, getting on the back burner, wiping the sweat off, taking a quick swig of Gatorade, and just going ahead and getting right back in afterwards. So maybe we can see that on this map too, because seeing how slow Haven is, and it's not nearly as quick when it comes under the rotations, that could be a double-edged sword in terms of how much slower it could be. But the full committals, I think, are going to be much stronger.
Yeah, full commit though coming out from the side of Charlotte. Seth is deep within Garage. Now, Neon did receive a substantial nerf in terms of the slide, the accuracy, as well as the charges for the slide, but Spade, not a problem still for them. It's just the rest of the team wasn't in the space as well, and the smoke's laid in by Georgia's own defense to cut off their own front side of sight, actually just shut down all of the approach for that duelist. With a blind fire shot through that Cypher cage, it's a flawless first round for the Georgia Bulldogs. Defensively, they powered through in that first half in a ridiculous score case on Lotus, but we got to hope things will be different here on Haven. But Georgia's still on that defense. Starting could be a mental drowner for UNCC if they let it get as bad as they did, the 10-2 at half that it was in our last map prior.
I mean, keep in mind, I mean, even in the top 2 players, sure, it's the first round, but I mean, 2 guys that we didn't really mention their name too much during that last map. Zach and Side. And Zach, we have seen be a disgusting monster from hell during the last couple splits. I mean, this guy is insane, and especially on the Cypher. So now that you're in a map, and not only that, but an agent that's gotten stronger as time has come along, well, this may be the point where he says, all right, I've been on the bench for a while now. I've been a nice little cheerleader there, but I think it's my time to go ahead and get inside the core.
Steph's going to take control here through Garage. Has 3 players still with them as it's a 4-on-5. Zach, though, gets an easy lineup for 3, but can only deal damage to 2 when Ruin 1's HP pool down to 0. Ruda, no more force. The defense, or sorry, the offense of Charlotte, as Baze is all in control through cutting into C-Long, and Isco even the wraparound through defender or attacker spawn, I should say. And this is where I highlighted map control and playing into attacker space, because there are 3 zones of control. It's a lot like a chessboard, if you want to think of it that way. You have where your pieces lie, where the opposition's pieces lie, your attacker and defender control, and then no man's land that you were in constant pursuit of, and in a way to deny the space of the opposition towards you, and as well as to claim that space. And Haven is arguably the best map for that. Take that middle control, fight for the attacker control of your defense, and flip the map on its head. It gives Georgia's round 2, though Baze obviously did a whole lot more in C-Long for themselves.
Yeah, I mean, that round alone, able to go ahead and find themselves a second, that's all you're looking for. But now seeing this round, seeing that already you're looking at those bullet holes being sprayed through that A site wall, that's going to go ahead and put a little bit of a leash on UNCC for pushing things out initially. And that's exactly what UGA want. They're on the defense. They do a great job of holding down these sites. They do a great job of just kind of waiting for UNCC to crouch walk or shift walk around these corners and just find themselves easy lineups, because they want to know by the time you actually get to site, you're so cautious that you're unwillingly walking right close enough to somebody with a Spectre to find at least something, or better yet, a Sheriff. As we've seen, these guys are very capable with that gun in their hands, but with the guns that are available to technically UGA Black, so long as the kills are made. See this nice little distraction coming out, and then there it is. Side already ready to roll off the back of it. That's another gun that can be picked up by somebody else, so long as the push is made.
Goes down, but
standing. Oh my God!
3 kills, the third coming while full flash, knocking down Ruda and making Georgia, where they could have probably had a very poor start to this round, turn back on its head, and Charlotte now are at a player disadvantage with control over towards site. But Tins has heaven control, cannot stay up there and get sent the other direction in the process. It evens to a 2-on-2 as Baze swings through their clove smoke, gets caught off the other way. Great tandem swing from Zach and Baze. Zach will put down a Cypher cage, layering a second. That's major audio cues, and C's just doesn't have the perfect angle, does not know where to try to play into the fire. It's a poor plant spot for where you were trying to defend that in a post plant for UNCC, and Georgia just take major advantage of that and find the final kill onto C's, making it so any rifle you would have had really and surely means nothing. You get 200 extra credits for the plant, folks, but everything else in that round is a big failure.
Yeah, I mean, losing 2,900 from every single one of your player, and better yet, I mean, keep in mind, 8,700 of that is just off the singular guy alone. I mean, that's a big problem. I mean, we can see it right here. Boom. I'd be living. But I mean, even then, that I think honestly, Riot probably added, because we didn't have the indicator, keep in mind, of whether or not we knew people were flashed for a while in the game, for at least like a year and a half, before finally we had that whole full flash, faces covered, half flashed, the kind of moves to more so like a sun behind the head. At that point, usually you'd be like, all right, maybe they saw me. That's fair. That's no problem whatsoever. But then you go back from your perspective, if and when we get replays, and you're saying, That is some BS if I'd ever seen it. Like, this guy didn't even see me? I mean, it's one of those things. It happens to the best of us, but even then, better yet, it happens to UNCC. And even then, more so, they have taken the time out to go ahead and reconvene themselves and collect themselves after that. And they're doing it at a much, much sooner point than what we saw during that last map. While, sure, that timeout they took during the first half didn't really do much for them, at least going ahead and showing that they are understanding problems and gathering enough information to go ahead and kind of at least have a talk and a sit around about it shows better signs for what they're going to be capable of inside the Haven.
Fuzzy sends out some recon bolts. At
least hopeful.
Prowling about within the smoke. What is this, Stewie 2K? This is Valorant, not CS. What's going on here? Hiding within their own smokes, finding frag after frag. Fuzzy, though, if there was any player to come into the limelight for the Charlotte roster to save them some space, it would have been Fuzzy, as shock dart after shock dart sent into Cubby. Seas is still there and has no ability to get out of there just yet until finally, double layered smoke from both teams laid on each end gives them just enough wiggle room and no pre-fire shots sent back from UGA. Seas can start to rotate with the rest of that team as Spike is now officially on the A site, planted for them, but Tins can catch off Seas, but despite them only having 46 HP, can only drop them down to about 20, if even that, as the majority of this UNCC roster are lagging down below 25 HP until only your one player at full, your Cypher. We've said how good Zach is. Well, now it's the time to see the Cypher for Charlotte pull up just the same. As Zach wants to take here in through Hall, lays down a Cypher cage. Isco from up above, Odin in hand, looking for pressure to the side. There's
Easy sprays,
down.
yeah.
Isco with two. Last one down below on ramp, just around the corner. Who else but Seas? And Seas has already been tacked by Tins, and Tins wants their finisher and will not be denied it.
Yeah, I was curious to see really how things were going to go. I mean, considering how much damage it's already done to everybody, but even more so knowing whether or not Isco had any shock darts in that back pocket. I mean, because all those were going to be free kills if you get a free bounce around, but didn't have anything to work with there. But, I mean, considering you got Node, that's just as good. It's going to spray around these corners and catch these players up before they even go ahead and follow through with the swing, and they're going to be killed through walls. So, I mean, once again, great execution, great retake coming out from UGA, and even in just kind of holding things down. Tins a bit quiet inside this match, but who cares? Baze is staying consistent, showing what they're made of here with that clove pick. Side is now stepped into the plate, as I mentioned. Wasn't super impactful with that raise during the first map, but it's shown that here, when you get to those lineups, when you put the guy in scenarios where he's got to click heads, he can do exactly that.
So it's going to go ahead and prowl up for map control, take bottom mid. You're at the majority of that valley and now start to crawl into mid window. Cypher cage, or Cypher tripwire, I should say, can be easily circumnavigated depending on its position. You can sometimes toss over and jump up on the short-potted side and then get over the end. Maybe you just wait for them to start to take ramp and then you break it and start to extend. There's the call we made. They jump up over the top. You're already in through. They laid the smoke down to make sure it was perfect. You'll have a, yes, spike down, but you have two angles at which attackers or defenders will now prowl up back through your flank. One down through short, side clears away Seas, down through long. Now you have the wrap from Pichu, hoping to find more. Step once into maybe a chance for one. Pichu just can't get anywhere, and the round is essentially forfeited now for the side of Charlotte. Just Step. There's just no way you'll take down all five stuck in Outer Hall. It's a flawless round for Georgia, and the 10-0 start we saw on our previous map. Well, you're halfway there already, Georgia. It's now a 5-0 start for you.
Yeah, great looks for them, just replicating what we saw in the last map, but with less utility, honestly.
Yeah.
Just a little just more raw gunfights, and they're just winning them out in the same regard. But, I mean, obviously, looking at Pichu, looking at Ruda, I mean, you see a little bit more unfortunate starts for some of these players, not keeping things nearly as close. We've seen a lot of just kills being made inside of smokes or just kind of off random pushes off the get-go. And Baze is at the head of a lot of those. I mean, rightfully so. Finding the effects, finding the kills, and every here and there has gotten to the point where we've now seen at least 2 ultimates come out from just that alone. Warrington, if I die, I mean, why not just go and die again? I'll probably find somebody else off the back of it so long as I can guarantee my team a kill. Right there, once again, doing it. Keeping Pichu at the bottom and not let the guy even get a chance to wake up.
Wake up, lock in. A chance for Sai to get another one to tally onto the scoreboard. They've not had any problems, Dallas, of being able to highlight themselves as a player, as an individual. And it really lets Georgia highlight themselves as a team and a roster. Takes an individual to elevate more. Ruda gets into a spot to plant. Isco, though, has a great line of sight.
Oh my god.
Zach feels like at any moment when they flick that mouse, there will be 0 delay in properly positioning this. You'll see it for the replays we throw back into it. Notice how quick, even in this replay, how quick that mouse flicks over to already be ready to tap onto the head of the player planting down that spike just behind box. Isco with the weight up from above. Odin not too far from it. Zach wrapping through. Here's your kill off to seize, and then the flick instantly through the box knows exactly where to go into it. This while utility is still being sent their way and the trust they have in their team. Georgia, no stopping them from 6. And with the the purchases right now from Charlotte, I don't think a 7th will be much harder for them either.
Just looking for something early, looking to get some pressure on. Already found a kill. I feel so bad for them. That was pure chance. Blind fire towards spawn. And it's one of the guys who hasn't gotten a kill yet. It's just, it feels like the world is out to get you right now. And it stinks to see that out of UNCC. 2 of their players seeing that way. Just go ahead and just completely put them down. And they've done nothing to deserve this whatsoever. But it's going to keep on rolling. It's going to keep on happening. UGA is going to keep on finding rounds up.
Wrap him in through Hang. Keep him stuck in a tight space. Keep him off towards Rapid. Keep him off towards Dugouts. Not going to matter. UGA up to 7, and we've seen this story before, Dallas. Over on our previous map, they had all of their ultimates available when they started to see, okay, this isn't really where we want to be. They used one ult that was Ruda's, and sorry, not Ruda's. It was technically PJ's at the time because they were on the Omen prior map, but it was the Omen who's now playing as Ruda to use the From the Shadows to go from C over to A. Georgia had already retaken the C site. They thought it was a free plant there, but using that ult changed things up. It gave them 2 in a row, and then things kind of fell apart there to the end of the half. But that second half is where Charlotte came back into the spice of things. Maybe they can close out the remaining 5 of this half, but they will have to be near perfect to do so because Georgia makes very few mistakes. It was an even fight at the start, but it is turning up blue in your kill feed. The Bulldogs defense powers through the offense, and look, I've seen this one before. From the shadows to an opposing site, but you don't have any teammates this time to work with. You'll have to get a 3-on-1 with only, I guess, 8 seconds of time bought from the transition over there with your ultimate. And there's the blood up to heaven. Tried. Good attempt, Fruta.
It was Fuzzy on B site that was cutting off A during that last time when it actually worked. Yeah. Fuzzy obviously was the main fragger that we were looking at during that last map. It is still at least staying at the top of the team for this one in this case. But I mean, even then, it's not nearly to the same regard as we see Baze or Zach as what we saw matching Isco during that last map, as impressive as that was. So, I mean, it's just a lot for UNCC to ask for. And I mean, if there was anybody that I want to go ahead and clutch that thing out, it's going to be Ruda or Pichu. It was going to be one of those 2 players saying, go ahead, wake up. Ruda has found somewhat of a regard and somewhat of an actual effort inside this map, but even then still, Pichu, you saw it during that last round. You can see those mental tools being taken on these players. Usually you don't go ahead and use the cages just to go ahead and kind of push yourself up, using those more proactively, kind of cutting things off for the retake, kind of stalling stuff out. But Pichu's saying, I need this to live, man. I need this to play the game. I haven't got to do that yet, and still ends up getting wrapped around by Zach and just getting absolutely popped off. And it's one of those things that you just really can't help. But a nice little start. First blood coming through. Side finds the exchange. Everything's turning into a little scuffle here on the B side. So we talked about weird ways to find yourself around to pull out. B side could be just that. The issue is UGA's finding the kills they want.
Yeah, they completely usurped that site control back away from Charlotte, and now Spike's still left inside of B. You have to reclaim this, so where's your 2 approaches to do so? Base will fall back quickly. You had some engaging shots coming the other way from your Sova, but you're just going to continue to lay down these smokes like you're saying, Dallas. Just continue to stall. We said Tejo was unbelievably strong at retaking, unbelievably strong at stalling things out. Charlotte, they don't have a really a big prowess for retake. So much that's going to come off the paranoia, but when you've got just shots down range from Isco with a flick over from Rabbit into the bottom side of ramp, nothing has to worry about stalling. And Pichu, every bullet directly above the head
not
of Baze.
him.
Baze.
If anybody, not
anybody
Pichu,
else but Pichu. Pichu's having enough trouble as it is.
Unnecessary. I mean, the guy's trying, and it's these 2 players that I mentioned, the ones that just didn't get to wake up for the longest time. Rudy gets sprayed down by a blind Isco. It's one of those things where, I mean, you're just hoping it happens. I mean, look at the spray here. It's on spot. Above. Finally, when you get those, it just goes too high, and the crowd comes through. If he's standing up there, the spray control's perfect. but it's just not. It's so unfortunate to see the small little details that take place within frames for these fights. It feels more like a fighting game at this point, with what we're looking at frame by frame for these fights to just go the way they do for some of these.
Rolling Thunder from C's tax their own teammate of Sep, and this is where you're starting to see the agent disparity come into play. Neon's just not bringing in a value for Charlotte, and there's a reason why Neon's not been heavily played in the pro scene on this map for a little bit here ever since that nerf. Maybe a chance to claw back though. Charlotte did get a couple frags here and there. Now it's just a one-player disparity, but C's gonna have to do a whole lot here with the classic, and they're only good for one in the process. 10-0 our start for UGA, and this very well could be an even better half than the first one was on our first map. I mean, they've already met and matched their scoreline, and my goodness, all of those ults that UNCC used to get two in the process, they're gone. Only one remaining is a Hunter's Screen. What does this do for you besides helping out a post plant? And let's be honest, UNCC's not had a really good shot at getting that spike down freely.
Yeah, I mean, it's unfortunately exactly as I predicted it so far. I mean, just seeing that obviously UGA, since they don't have those avenues, they don't have a different place in the map to kind of deviate to, they're just going full commit. And if the player that is Baze doing exactly what he's doing, they're just not having a problem with those commits. They're saying, look, keep going, keep pressing W. Game's not over, round's not done yet. But maybe UNCC in a round like this, they can find something out of it. But guess who's still alive? Hey, able to find one, top of the resurrection, knowing exactly where the guy is and who's there for the trade. Dak, it's one of those situations, man, where UGA, they understand, as I mentioned, where is the fight? Run at it. There is no deviation. There is no change course. There is no going off the beaten path. There is maps, there is lanes, and we're going to press W down on those and just kill the guys till they can't play anymore. And unfortunately, 4 out of the 5 players has already been feeling the effect of that for the past 11 rounds. And they have to find a way to completely, mid-game, just scratch that off the record because their timeout was done back in round number 3.
I know this may not be the right game to parlay things to, but like any MOBA, when things get out of hand and you start to fall behind in things, you have to kind of realize that if you're losing left lane, you're going to start trying to give them some assistance. Players need to start helping out other players in that regard. And Georgia's just been so much better about assisting each other. But Sep does get really far deep into the back of A's site. Pre-fires into the smoke that's laid inside Hall, and is able to squeak away one kill. That's the duelist for the side of Georgia, no longer able to contend. Sides out on the board, but Shock Dart does so much to Sep. A single tap can now ruin their chances at holding this, and while they do still have a weapon in hand and they are a dangerous force, you know that you can get that kill, but Baze pays the ultimate price for it, failing in the process, jumping down through the hell, no one there. Tens just pre-fires through the other side of smoke, and now it's a 2-on-2, but Zach is 13 HP, and Pichu just sprays through for 2. There's only one spot you can be in. It's either hell or to be sit there within the smoke. It's the first and only one for UNCC in the first half. They will not be completely swept in that first half.
I mean, there's a chance here. It's a long shot in hell, but I mean, it is a chance nonetheless. It is something to work with. It is a point on the board, and it's a new half, better yet, because that is where we saw Zach able to go ahead and kind of really excel. What we saw, at least during my previous experience watching this guy, was during those defensive sides. The issue is now, though, is he's not as equally strong. In some circumstances, depending on the day, he's better, especially in a map like this. We have seen this man go and just completely play his own game, just go in completely polar opposite sides of the map from the rest of the team and surmount 2 or 3 kills and just force rotates for a spike that isn't even going to be there. So you got to make sure to find these instantaneous picks, and I don't know if we can see UNCC, while maybe around when it's possible, to the same level that we saw UGA Black do with that flawless to kick things off. It's not going to be possible. One already down.
Yeah, Georgia decided to go. We'll bring out classics majority-wise on the offense, but we're going to bring out a whole load of utility. But there's only one person really using that utility against. What's left? Not much. And Charlotte take very big advantage of the scenario afterwards, usurping control back over to the site, knowing that all the players be trapped really in one single position, closer to the tube side of site and the opposing side of the Radiant stack. Georgia just cannot survive the pushback through for Charlotte, and this is where you have to set that tone, temper expectations. You get your 1, 2 in a row for you. The last time you saw 2 in a row in the first half or in the start of our previous map on Lotus, look how it panned out. Back in return for Georgia control, you cannot let them find a single round, because the moment you do, Dallas, they're now match and series point to take the first game, first series of this tier 1 pool, inside of the SEL season for our spring.
Better yet, they would be literally the first ones probably to take it. I mean, by an actual win, of course, because the other one would, it's seemingly so, being a forfeit. So, being the fastest game, I talked about making statements during these earlier rounds, letting teams know with these point discrepancies, with these differentials, letting them know what you're made of. And I think everybody's going to be able to look at that League OS and say, oh my God. It's the same crew that we saw last season, but they're making sure that we know it instantaneous.
Yeah, their speed, they know that they're going to have arguably weaker weapons. They're just going to try to get as fast as possible into the face of UNCC. In S&G rounds, right, like, they're not going to have much to them. It's just they want to play a little bit closer, but they still want to play medium range. If you only have pistols, what do you do to fight that? Get into their face as soon as possible. Put a smoke in and run through the smoke. Stewie, right? Like, this is literally CS in its incarnate state. And we're seeing it come through in Valorant for that B site. It's just dirty work. And Georgia, take advantage of the situation. Charlotte needs to kind of look at that and be like, that's a learning point for us. That's something that we need to drive home in our practices and in our scrims to say there's never truly a no about what they're going to do, what they're going to bring to the table, especially not when it's a team as good as this Georgia Black roster is. Aside gets the first blood. Fells Pichu down through mid, and now that gives you the option, if you wanted to send your Sentinel through that space, but you've left both your controller and Sentinel closer towards C long, where you know there is no Sentinel there, so let's just take sight. It should be free for us.
Yeah. Gotta go ahead and just kind of close things out here, get that spike down, force the retake. Weaponry isn't there for UNCC, but man, the will better be. I'm hoping they can just go ahead, fester something up here. And if we're going ahead and finding at least one pick here, it's going to be an exchange off the back of it, but there's still players alive. While one is looking relatively low, there's still shots to be made. There's still chance that you can take. The problem is when you got so many players just dropping so darn fast for the controller who has not let off the gas the entire game. It all comes down to Fuzzy, the MVP of map number one, who can't even get a chance to swing because, well, their counterpart, another initiator waiting for a note.
It is what it is. Georgia take this one round at a time, one map at a time. They get through the first one a little bit tougher than they expected after the 10-2 start to their first half. But the second one, they felt in full control, and the scoreline is indicative of that success. And you said teams are looking at this in League OS, in our stats page, to say, wow, that score differential is going to be something that's very dangerous to look at. And in Tier 1, well, yes, pools are split. And you can argue, well, Pool 1 is different from Pool 2, so I'm not too worried about the other side until eventually they converge in playoffs, right? But it is going to matter when you start to look at who they're facing, because arguably, and I mentioned this with TJ a couple times during our show for our pulling out of the hat, it felt like Tier 1 for both Rocket League and Valorant really were even. There was no pool of death for Tier 1. It felt like there is equal affirmative team cohesion and presence in both sides of the pools. Maybe that changes in Pool 2. Both of our Group 6s kind of felt like, I won't say dud pools, but they were obviously the weaker pools out of everything. But Tier 1 for both sides, we really lucked out. It was not just the best teams and then the worst teams for the other side. It was literally back and forth, back and forth. You're still going to have really great competition in front of you. Charlotte, one loss does not decide how your team will go forward. You have to take this one on the chin, and maybe Baronhaven, even though that was your map pick.
Yeah, I mean, and even then, looking at the rest of the group, I mean, obviously, if people haven't been keeping up pretty chance, I mean, you got UGA Black. I mean, what was it? Our top picks for this entire thing. I mean, at least when it came around to the tiers, I don't know if we have the graphic able to pull up on stream. Probably not, but I know at least on Twitter it's going to be somewhere that the majority of our top four, if not, depending on who you look at, the entirety of the top four is basically in this pool too.
Yeah.
So knowing that UGA Black, I mean, obviously these are going to be bangers back to back. I mean, every single week it feels, but I mean, knowing what's going to be happening here. I mean, this is Cumberland, this is Kentucky. I mean, this is just absolutely disgusting. Knowing that these are your other two opponents, that's a big issue. That's a very big issue. Knowing that, I mean, you just faced a third of what your season is going to be. That's gonna tighten up. And honestly, when we talk about it being even, it doesn't get any easier. If anything, it could possibly get a little bit harder. I mean, knowing that, how much worse can it really get besides what we saw in a 13-0, 13-1, 13-2 kind of skill disparity. But I mean, Cumberland could do it faster. Kentucky could do it different. It's one of those things where, I mean, I'm not sleeping. I'm not resting my laurels on Charlotte Esports just yet. But I mean, we know what this team is made of, but you guys just got to get to playoffs. Yeah. That's it. You don't need to swim. You don't need to be on the fastest speedboat on the waters. You just got to float. You just got to be there and you got to live.
Yeah, a lot like any competitive team that took the crown in a prior season to come back, you have a marker on your head, Georgia, right? And coming out in week one like this just makes that even more apparent. So when the pools eventually converge, it's going to get very dirty. There will be blood in the water, and that Georgia confidence is going to have to either match what it's bringing to the table. You have to have your bite meet your bark, or you're going to unfortunately fall to the wayside, because there are still ridiculous teams in this. Like we said, I think you and I did put for our talent rankings for week one, and that's going to change for week two. I'd like to do this every week with us, Dallas, where we kind of put where we view based on so far standings, how we view into this. Obviously,
Right.
UGA is going to move up. They're going to be one or number two. It's going to come down to the scoreline. I feel like for that Chattanooga game, it's going to come down to the scoreline for who's the other game that I was paying attention to. The Chattanooga is against the UGA Red, so like it may not matter. The James Madison game won't matter at all in that storyline. It's going to matter for the Cumberland game. Those could obviously change, but UGA is obviously going to move up much higher in my list. I think you already had them at 2.
Yeah, 3 of my 4 were literally inside this pool.
This pool is very strong. But the issue with tier 1 is it's like, yes, we have like teams that are here that are like upper CVAL teams, top 20, top 30 overall CVAL teams. But that's like, just discounting this season, it's just going to get worse. We have so many programs that we know that their Rocket League team is in the SEL. And then they're just like, we couldn't do it this semester. We were already committed to this league and this league. It didn't have time, but we are coming next semester. And those are top 10 CVAL teams. Those are top 15 CVAL teams. So where you think you are right now, top dog, may not matter coming around to the next semester, the next split, when those points be even more important, because, yeah, Georgia, you probably already punched a ticket to land with the victory last semester, but could you do it again a year back to back, especially if you make team changes and roster changes? Time will have to tell. Dallas, any closing opinions about how this one felt for you? I think there's a lot that Charlotte could change, and a great game overall from Georgia. Both teams still did their best.
Yeah, like I said, I mean, really, obviously, you can only give so many praises to Georgia for their performance today. Can't really go ahead and give them too much credit, considering what they already just showed us on the server. I mean, you could sing their praises all day, but they're the ones that did the job. You can go back and watch the entire stream, and they'll speak for themselves. But when it comes around to Charlotte, I mean, we've seen what these guys are made of. We can't sleep on them just yet. And as I said, it doesn't come down to the saying of sinking or swimming. Just float, man. Just survive, because I mean, all these pools, they're going to be a problem, and you just got to find a way to stick it out.
Yeah. What makes or breaks a team is how much you improve throughout the rest of the season. Week 1 is only week 1. There's still plenty more action to go up until May when that land comes through. Have we determined, like, vocally, have we said the location for the land event? Has that been stated, producer?
I don't think so, unless y'all did during the draw show, but
I did.
I mean,
I'm checking the announcements. Has not been officially announced. And I won't mention the location. Has been determined, though. But you want to stay action. It's a great spot for everybody to show up and try to show out, because that is where the best of the best are going to be, and you want to be included upon that. Charlotte, work your best to get there. The chances are you still have a chance with playoffs when tier 2's upper teams step into the foray to join in. Maybe you get bracket blessed, baby. Maybe you don't. Maybe it'll be a UGA show fest throughout the rest, as the top 2 teams in tier 1 could try to prove the Bulldogs can be the best once again. But until then, stay tuned. There'll be more action from the Valorant side of things and the Rocket League side of things just next week here from the SEL. We see you guys there.